Right now I'm 29 years old, and I used this strategy when I was 20 years old, 23 years old, and at 28 years old. And at 28 years old, yes, I know I'm an adult and I can make my own decisions, but I still live with my parents. So if I want to do anything, I mean, I could do it myself and just do it, but I do want to get the approval of my parents just to feel peace in my heart. So the first thing you want to do when you're trying to convince your parents or your guardian of your trip, whether it's exchange or it's a volunteer trip or some other kind of trip, is to just bring it up to them and ask them what they think of it. Like, you can just bring it up casually. The answer will usually be like, no. And that totally makes sense, because if like the first time you bring it up, it might just sound like some idea that you have. So that's okay. Now, what you're gonna do is then make a trip proposal that summarizes what you're planning to do, the benefits, the overview of contingencies, your budget, and a bunch of other things. So I will be going over this trip proposal template later on, but I wanna give you an overview first of what to do. The reason why you wanna make a trip proposal is because a lot of the times when we just tell them we wanna do this, where we wanna do that, they might just think that we are, just coming up with some random ideas and not really serious about it. But when you spend the time to put together some kind of a document, a proposal of what exactly you want to do and why you want to do it, they will take you more seriously, and they will appreciate that you've put a lot of time and effort into planning this whole thing and making sure that you have everything down, like your budget, where you're gonna stay. You don't have to like book the place where you're staying, but at least just researching your accommodation, your flights, what happens if there is a COVID lockdown or something. Like, all these safety stuff is really important for your parents or your guardians to know. And then after you've given them the trip proposal and reviewed it with them, hopefully they say yes. And then after that, you plan the trip, obviously. Now, before you go on the trip, you want to give them an itinerary of where exactly you're going, where you're staying, your flight details and everything, and contact numbers of people that you know in the place that you're going. You want to do this so you can reassure them that you're going to be okay, and they have all the contact numbers that they need just in case. Another thing I use is an app called 360. I think it's called Life 360. It basically lets your family members be able to track wherever you are. So I use this at home in Vancouver too. Like, when I'm like driving somewhere, my dad can see exactly where I am. So that's also something really useful, and it might make them feel more at peace with your trip if they know exactly where you are and they can see it on the app. Not sponsored, by the way. Just another tip for traveling that I think a lot of people forget is, if you are going on a trip and you need to access your whatever logins that you have online, like your Gmail, YouTube channel. If you run a business, then you might have to access like your banking information, email list, provider, whatever. It's a bit of a hassle if you have two-factor authentication connected to your phone. So what I suggest is looking into dual SIM cards or eSIMs. You can definitely swap out your SIM card for the new SIM card of the country that you're going to, but it is a hassle every time you need to receive a text message of a code that you need to input. And a tip is to use an earring. If you have your earring, use that little thingy to poke it into the SIM card slot so you can take out the SIM card. Something else you can do is to set up Google Authenticator. There's also a lot of other authenticator apps you could look into, and to set up backup codes. When you're on the trip, you want to check in with them, especially at the beginning of the trip, just telling them, hey, I'm at the airport. Hey, I arrived at the hotel. Now I'm hanging out with my friends. Send them a couple photos and they'll feel at ease. Then after the trip, you're gonna tell them how amazing everything was, all the things you learned, all the growth you had, and make sure you communicate with them that it was so worth it and everything. So how do you make a trip proposal? This is the document I used for my most recent trip, which at first I planned it to be a 1-month trip, but actually I've been abroad for half a year because I just kept extending things, and I did end up going to Beijing and visiting relatives for a couple of months. So I'm gonna go over what exactly I put into this trip proposal, and you can change things depending on what kind of trip this is. So it might be a volunteer trip that you want to go on. Maybe it's a trip with friends or something, or you're like me and you want to try the whole digital nomading thing. First thing is I put a summary of what the whole trip is about. and how many days it's supposed to be, just some important information about flights, maybe where else you're gonna go, and your goals for the trip. What is the main purpose of this trip? So for my trip, this one was to work and to make YouTube content and work on my Etsy shop. And I'm gonna work 6 to 7 hours a day, and me being in a different country will give me more ideas and inspiration for content. The next thing I have here is flights. So this is the flight I wanted to buy, and I did actually buy this flight later on. So you can put a screenshot of the flights, or if you are considering several flights, you can put several screenshots. And I did have a 9-hour layover in Tokyo, and it worked out perfectly. I could just visit my friend. I don't know if you can hear the birds. Next thing is a simple budget. I could have made this a lot more in depth, but I think this covered most of what I had to account for. So flights, accommodation, food, and other things. I originally proposed just one location, so I wasn't sure where else I was gonna go. But if you have multiple locations, then you might want to break it down by the location as well. Next section I have is security and safety. These are all the things I plan to do. So I'll live near my friend, I'll get travel insurance, I'll get a SIM card, and I also have my Canadian phone in case. Next is accommodation. So you can put a couple screenshots of places that you might stay at and what the cost will be. The next one is contact information of the people you know there. So I put, okay, I have a friend named Nancy, not her actual name. I'm gonna live close to her. I've known her for 4 years, and I added a couple more sentences about how I know her and how we've interacted. She visited me before, and this is what our relationship is like as a friend. In my original proposal, I also put a few pictures of my friend just so my parents get the vibe of who this person is. And I also asked for her address and her phone number. Another section I added was contacts in Asia in case of emergency and I need to go somewhere safe. So I put a list of the people I know and how I know them. Then I put some information about COVID, like what is required for getting into that country. Do you need to test? Is there quarantine? What are the health things you need to do? And then I have information about the visa that I needed to get for Vietnam. And then I put the address and phone number of the Embassy of Canada, Consulate General of Canada, and what I'll do if there's some kind of danger. So I'll go to Singapore, which I believe is the safest place in Southeast Asia. The next section I have is my income projection, because one of the biggest objections that my parents have with me traveling is, Dina, why are you traveling? You're wasting money. You're not making that much money. Don't waste this money going traveling. So of course I had to put in a section about the money I'm making. Now, depending on what you think your parents' objections will be, you're gonna add more information, okay, in your trip proposal. So for me, it was about the income. For you, it might be something else, like maybe they're really concerned for your safety. Maybe they're really concerned about you not speaking the language or something. And so maybe you need to add some information about, okay, you're gonna learn the basic phrases and practice a little bit of the language. Whatever you think their objection will be, add information that will counteract that. So I added information about my income. So I have my Etsy shop, like estimated profit, a couple of screenshots. I have my YouTube income projection screenshots. And then I also had a couple of other sources of income in January and February, which I listed here, and how much money I'm making. I'm a big fan of people traveling, and I know this topic is not really related to what I'm talking about on my channel usually, but I still wanted to make this because I know there are a lot of people. You might be in college, you might be in your 20s trying to travel, but your parents just don't understand why you want to do this. So hopefully this was helpful. You can download this, you can get this for free. Go to the link in my description and you can sign up for this, and I'll give you access to this Google Docs and you can make your own trip proposal. And let me know in the comments if you are gonna use this and where you are planning to go and what kind of trip it's gonna be.